The universe had no word for stubborn until it met Earth. Linguist Renera of the Vreth Linguistic Institute had been assigned to the Humanity Documentation Project with a specific academic detachment. She applied to all subjects. She was, by her colleagues' assessment, the best in her field. She was also, they agreed, somewhat difficult. Not in personality, but in the sense that she had extremely high standards for evidence and extremely low tolerance for imprecision. She had, in 30 years of lexicographic work, rejected more proposed dictionary entries than any other committee member in the Institute's history. The Humanity Documentation Project had been proposed in the second year after accession by a committee that included 3 Vreth scholars, 2 Keth linguists, and the entire translation division of the Galactic Academic Assembly. The proposal was simple in premise. Humanity's arrival in the galactic community had introduced behavioral concepts, cultural practices, and communicative patterns that did not have adequate equivalents in any of the 17 base languages of Galactic Standard. The dictionary needed updating. Renera had accepted the project lead position because the subject was genuinely interesting. She had read the pre-existing Galactic Standard entries for concepts adjacent to what she was expecting to document: curiosity, patience, persistence, courage, and had found them all technically correct and entirely inadequate. Like descriptions of colors to someone who has never seen them. Accurate but insufficient. She had 6 months to produce the documentation package. At the end of month 1, she was 3 entries behind schedule and had not yet submitted a single completed entry. She had submitted 14 rejected first drafts. Her research assistant, Teo, had asked about this. "The entries aren't wrong," she said. "They're just not right." He looked at the 14 rejected drafts. "You've defined curiosity in 14 different ways. All correct. None complete." She looked at the current draft. Galactic Standard has a word for curiosity. Intellectual interest in the unknown, motivated by a desire for increased understanding. Standard definition. Accurate. But humanity's application of the concept requires a subcategory. Applied curiosity. The conversion of not knowing into active investigation, regardless of whether the investigation is professionally required, personally relevant, or practically useful. They don't experience curiosity passively. They act on it, reflexively, without conscious decision. She paused. The existing definition implies choice. What I'm observing is more like breathing. You don't decide to investigate. The investigation begins because the curiosity is there, and curiosity, in humans, has motor function. Teo looked at the draft for a moment. "That's a new word," he said. "That's a new word," she agreed. "And that's just month 1. Month 2, patience." Galactic Standard had an extensive lexical field for patience. Rinkatha, the endurance of discomfort without complaint. Vailsoreth, the strategic delay of action to allow better conditions. Tiamanth, the acceptance of slow progress as a feature rather than a failure. She documented all 3 in their application to human behavior. All 3 were present. None of them captured the specific variant she kept observing. The specific variant she kept observing was patience as commitment, the deliberate deployment of time as a resource, not passive waiting but active choosing to wait in service of a specific purpose. The patience of someone who knows what they're building toward and has decided the timeline is acceptable. She called it strategic patience in her first draft and was immediately dissatisfied with the term. Strategic implied calculation. What she was observing had calculation in it, but was not reducible to it. It was more fundamental, more woven in, like the difference between deciding to breathe deeply and simply breathing deeply because you are calm. She wrote, in her personal notes at the end of month 2, "I am beginning to think that human patience is not a strategy they deploy. It is a quality of their relationship to time itself. They appear to experience time differently than any species I have studied. Not more or less acute, differently oriented. They are not waiting for things to be different. They are working toward things being different, at whatever pace is required, and finding the pace acceptable." She submitted the entry at the end of month 2 with a note to the committee. This is my best approximation. It is not complete. I don't know that I can make it complete without another year of observation. The committee approved it. They were getting used to entries that came with caveats. Month 3. Courage. She had expected this to be straightforward. Every species in the galaxy had a concept of courage. She had 17 excellent definitions to draw from. She abandoned them all by the end of the first week. Not because they were wrong, because they all defined courage in opposition to fear. The ability to act despite fear. The overriding of fear by purpose. The acceptance of risk in service of a valued outcome. All variations on the same structure. Fear present, action chosen anyway. What she was observing in humans was more complicated. In some cases, the fear was absent. She had documented 12 cases of human engagement with situations that should, by any reasonable biological assessment, produce significant fear responses, in which the humans appeared to be experiencing something closer to interest. Focused attention, the specific state of someone encountering a problem they intend to solve. In other cases, the fear was present but appeared to function differently, not as an obstacle to action, but as information about the situation, processed, and then set aside in the way you set aside information that's been noted and is no longer needed for the current task. She wrote, Human courage may not be the opposite of fear. It may be the absence of a requirement for fear's absence. She looked at this sentence for a long time. She submitted it with 3 additional paragraphs of qualification and one note that said, I am aware this entry is not satisfying. I do not know how to make it more satisfying without being less accurate. Month 4. She reached the word she had not expected to need. Month 4 was when she found stubborn. It wasn't in the brief. The project brief covered expected documentation areas, curiosity, patience, courage, a list of other effective and behavioral concepts that the academic assembly had identified as requiring new or revised entries. Stubborn was not on the list. She found it in the data. She was reviewing incident documentation from the past year. 400 cases, assembled from academic and diplomatic records, covering examples of human behavior that had required documentation by the Vreth Translation Division because standard terminology had proved inadequate. She was looking for patterns. She was doing this systematically, because she was Rhaenyra and systematic was the only mode she had. The pattern she found was not on her list. It appeared in 43 cases, then 60. Then, as she reran the analysis with updated parameters, 114. In every case, the structure was the same. A human or group of humans pursuing an objective that all available rational analysis indicated was unlikely to succeed, or likely to succeed only at disproportionate cost, or both. And continuing, not because they had information that changed the analysis, not because circumstances had improved, because they had decided the objective was worth it, and that was sufficient reason to continue. She documented the endurance. 17 hours of siege, building an intelligence package. She documented the engineering team that built 8 orbital platforms in 72 hours. She documented Yara Solis at the quarantine perimeter, 1 ship against 17 fleets, weapons cold, announcing, we're patient. We can wait, She documented Dr. Osemensa, sitting alone on a night shift after detecting a non-human signal, trying to answer for 2 hours, submitting a report that went into a queue for 63 years, keeping a copy because keeping the file seemed like the right thing to do. 400 examples, all from the past 6 months, all from humanity. She looked at the 17 base languages. There was no word, not the way she needed. There were approximations, words for persistence, for resistance, for refusal. But all of them carried connotations she couldn't use. Persistence implied continuation against obstacles. Resistance implied opposition. Refusal implied a point of refusal being reached. What she was documenting was more fundamental. Not continuation against obstacles. Not resistance to opposition. The specific quality of having decided that something mattered and proceeding from that decision as from a fixed point. The only word she had was English. Stubborn. She presented her findings to the Galactic Standard Dictionary Committee in the 6th month. She had been presenting dictionary entries to committees for 30 years. She had developed a precise, technical presentation style that her colleagues described as ruthlessly efficient and somewhat terrifying, but always right. She had not expected this presentation to be different. She was aware, about 12 minutes in, that it was different. She had begun with the 400 examples. Chronological, each one documented, analyzed, connected to the central behavioral pattern. This was standard. What was not standard was what happened when she reached the conclusion section. She stopped. The committee waited. She said, "I want to make sure I am presenting this accurately, because I think the entry is the most significant one in this package, and I don't want to understate what I've found." More waiting. "In 30 years of lexicographic work," she said, "I have never documented a behavioral concept for which no equivalent exists in any base language. Every human trait I have examined has had an equivalent, different in degree, different in context, sometimes requiring subcategories or qualifications, but rooted in something that existed." She paused. "This one doesn't. There is no word for this because no other species has required one. Not because they don't exhibit persistence or determination or resolution. They do. All of those words are in the dictionary. But the specific quality I'm documenting, the quality of having decided that something is worth it and proceeding from that decision as from a foundational premise rather than a conclusion subject to revision." She stopped again. "Take your time," the committee chair said. "It's not a trait," she said. "That's what I want the committee to understand. It's not a trait in the way that courage is a trait or patience is a trait. Those are qualities that can vary in degree, that can be cultivated or eroded, that exist on a spectrum. This is more like a commitment, a way of relating to decisions. Once they have decided, once something has become worth it, the decision is not a variable anymore. It is a fact about the situation." She looked at the committee. "I'm standing here because one species decided that understanding themselves and being understood was worth whatever it took. And they proceeded from that decision consistently, through 61 years of quarantine, through military confrontations, through diplomatic negotiations, through an accession process that required them to find a 300-year-old constitutional violation that nobody had noticed. They did not stop. They did not revise the decision. They simply continued." She paused. "The universe didn't have a word for this, because no species needed one. I am submitting this entry because one species decided that was an oversight." The committee voted. 17 blue lights. Unanimous. For minutes. The entry read, *stubborn. Loan term. English/Terran. Standard the specific quality of proceeding from a decision as from a foundational premise. The determination that arises not from resistance to obstacles, but from the prior establishment of something as worth pursuing. Distinguished from persistence, continuation against obstacles, by its relationship to the original decision. Stubborn behavior does not measure obstacles against costs. It measures obstacles against the prior decision that the objective is worth whatever cost is required. Asterisk first documented in relation to Homo sapiens, human, subjects. Proposed for inclusion in Galactic Standard by the Vreth Linguistic Institute. Year 3 of the Galactic Accession of Earth. Asterisk usage note. When encountered in a human subject, this quality should not be treated as the result of inflexibility or irrationality. It is the result of a prior decision that the observer may not have full access to. Attempting to address stubborn behavior by raising costs or obstacles is unlikely to be effective. The prior decision has already priced in resistance. Effective engagement involves understanding the prior decision. See also, commitment, patience, human variant, applied curiosity. Renera received the approval notification in her office and sat quietly for a while. She had been assigned to this project as an academic exercise, a lexicographic challenge. She had not expected it to be this. She was not certain what this was precisely. She had spent 6 months documenting humanity, one concept at a time, and at the end of the documentation she felt She did not have a breath word for what she felt. She opened a new document. She began drafting a proposal for a second project. Subject: long-term embedded observation, human cultural contexts, minimum duration 1 standard year. She titled it, in English, because the word felt right. Stubborn. She smiled. Then she noted the smile and made an annotation for her personal records. She was beginning to understand that living next to humanity was going to require a continuous process of updating your definitions. She found this. She looked through her vocabulary. She found this the most accurate application of applied curiosity she had experienced in 30 years of work. She submitted the project proposal. She already had questions.